In the quiet village of Daehyun, nestled between the arms of mist-covered hills and rice paddies, life was simple. The people rose with the sun, worked with the earth, and prayed to the heavens for peace. In this sleepy town, under the shade of ancient cherry blossom trees, lived a young man named Yoon-gi. Yoon-gi was not remarkable by noble standards. He was neither born into wealth nor trained in scholarly arts, but he was observant, thoughtful, and gentle. He lived with his widowed father, helping him operate a modest paper mill along the stream that ran through the village. Their days were long and uneventful, but for Yoon-gi, the most anticipated moments came just before dawn. Each morning, before the world stirred awake, Yoon-gi would climb an old willow tree that stood at the edge of the noble Ha family's estate. From his hidden perch, he watched her. Soo-ah, the only daughter of Magistrate Ha, was the very image of elegance. Not because she wore silk handboks or had servants trail her every move, but because she had a quiet, unassuming presence that made her feel otherworldly. She would step into the courtyard, her book of poems in hand, and sit beneath the large cherry tree where petals fell like whispers. Sometimes she would feed the sparrows or sing softly to herself. Other times, she would simply stare at the horizon, lost in thought. Yoon-gi never meant to spy. The first time he saw her was purely by accident. He had been retrieving a kite stuck in the tree, but from the moment he saw her, he was captivated. Not just by her beauty, but by the sadness in her eyes, a longing he couldn't understand, but deeply felt. From then on, it became a quiet ritual. Months passed, seasons changed, and Yoon-gi's feelings deepened. He started to bring a sketchbook, drawing her silhouette against the morning light. He imagined what her voice sounded like when she laughed freely, wondered what dreams she held in her heart, and yet he never dared to speak to her. How could a common papermaker approach the daughter of a magistrate? Then came the morning that changed everything. It was spring. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, casting the estate in a blanket of pink and white. Yoon-gi was in his usual spot, sketching the gentle curve of Soo-ah's jaw when she suddenly stopped reading, closed her book, and looked directly at him. "Are you going to stay up there all day?" she said, her voice clear and composed. "Or will you finally come down and say hello?" Yoon-gi's breath caught. His pencil slipped from his fingers and tumbled to the ground. In his panic, he tried to descend quickly but lost his footing and fell with a thud into a pile of flower petals and grass. Soo-ah stood up, walking over to where he lay. She peered down at him, her head slightly tilted. There was amusement in her eyes, but not cruelty. "You're the boy who draws," she said softly, holding up his sketchbook that had fallen open nearby. "You drew me?" I'm sorry," Yoon-gi stammered, scrambling to his knees. "I didn't mean to, I wasn't. It's just, you're always there and—" To his shock, Soo-ah smiled, a real, warm smile that lit up her whole face. "You've been watching me for months. I thought I was imagining it at first," she said, kneeling beside him. "But then I started leaving the window open, just to hear if the tree rustled." Yoon-gi stared at her wide-eyed. You knew?" "Of course. But I wanted to see how long you would stay in the shadows." For the first time, they sat close enough to see the colors in each other's eyes. There was awkward silence, then shy laughter. Soo-ah plucked a petal from his hair. "That was quite the fall," she teased. Yoon-gi smiled sheepishly. "You caught me." Spring deepened in Daehyun, and with each dawn, the cherry blossoms danced more fervently in the wind. For Yoon-gi and Soo-ah, their secret meetings beneath the tree had become the anchor of their days. They were moments stitched together with stolen glances, laughter buried in sleeves, and the quiet exchange of dreams. Yoon-gi had never known that someone like Soo-ah could laugh so freely, or that her poetry, written in neat, flowing script, could carry such depth. Soo-ah, in turn, was enchanted by his sketches. Her favorite was the one where he had drawn her with her eyes closed, a sparrow perched on her shoulder. "You make me look as though I belonged to another world," she had whispered, brushing her fingers over the charcoal lines. "You do," he replied, barely audible, as his heart threatened to leap from his chest. But for all their tenderness, fear lingered at the edges. Every passing servant, every creaking branch reminded them that their world was fragile. Soo-ah was of noble blood. Her life was not her own. Yoon-gi was a papermaker's son. He had nothing to offer but honesty and adoration. Still, they met, morning after morning. Yoon-gi began teaching Soo-ah how to draw. She was clumsy at first, her hands more accustomed to brushes dipped in ink for writing verses. But she was eager, and her drawings, though crude, were full of emotion. In return, she taught him how to read classical poems, tracing the hanja slowly so he could follow. One morning, Soo-ah arrived breathless, her cheeks tinged with a flush not from the cold. "My father has returned from the capital," she said, glancing around nervously, "and he's brought guests. I may not be able to meet you for a few days." Yoon-gi felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Is everything all right?" She nodded too quickly. "Yes, of course. Just be careful. Don't come near the tree for a while. Please." That was the last he saw of her for 3 days. Each morning, Yoon-gi still climbed the tree, waiting in silence. He watched the empty courtyard. He sketched her absence. On the 3rd day, he left a small drawing in the nook of the tree trunk, a sketch of a sparrow and a poem she had once recited. He hoped it would reach her. On the 4th day, she returned. Soo-ah stepped into the courtyard just before the sun rose, her handbag more ornate than usual. Her hair was pinned with silver. She didn't carry her poems. "I found your drawing," she said softly, standing beneath the tree. "It gave me strength." Yoon-gi's heart swelled with relief, but he could see the sorrow in her eyes. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then looked up at him. "There's something I haven't told you. My father, he's been speaking with the royal envoy." Yoon-gi froze. "The king is passing through our region in a fortnight, and they wish to present me to him." The words hung in the air like thunder. "No," Yoon-gi breathed. "Soo-ah." "I don't want to," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'd rather live in a paper mill making sheets by your side than sit on silk and never feel the morning breeze again." Yoon-gi stood before her, close enough to touch, but still afraid. "Then we must run," he said. She looked at him with wide, startled eyes. "Where?" "Anywhere they can't find us." But even as the words left his mouth, they both knew the truth. There was nowhere in Joseon where a commoner could steal the bride of a king. Yet they were so passionate and would not give up easily. And so began their quiet rebellion of letters hidden beneath floorboards, of escape plans whispered through wind, and of love trying to outrun the march of power. The days stretched on like endless threads of woven fate. After Soo-ah's confession of her impending fate, Yoon-gi's world felt like it was being torn in two. The weight of their love seemed to hang between them like a delicate thread, about to snap at any moment. He couldn't bear the thought of her being taken away by a royal decree, to live a life of grandeur but without the warmth of the life they had begun to build in secret. Still, they continued their quiet rebellion. Letters were exchanged, carefully folded and hidden beneath floorboards, between moments of work and study. Yoon-gi's sketches filled Soo-ah's heart with hope, and Soo-ah's poetry offered Yoon-gi solace. The courtyard remained their sanctuary, even as the clouds of fate loomed closer. It was a week before the king's arrival, and the royal entourage had begun to flood the village. Town officials scurried about, preparing for the king's passage, making sure the roads were clear, the houses cleaned, the markets ready. Even the most modest of homes were adorned with red cloths to celebrate the visit, and the nobility spoke in hushed tones of the king's interest in the maiden they would present to him. Yoon-gi could not bear to stay in the village, watching the parade of royalty, as though his heart would be ripped from his chest, and yet he had no choice. Soo-ah's father had already made the arrangement. There was no escape, and she would be taken. Her father would allow it, her mother would allow it, and he, a mere papermaker's son, had no standing to stop it. But Yoon-gi could not stay silent. He had not given up. He had whispered to Soo-ah in secret that they would run and they would hide. The plan was simple. The night before the king's arrival, they would flee to the mountain village in the west, far from the capital, where no one knew their names. But Soo-ah's fear was growing. Her voice, whenever they spoke of the plan, trembled with uncertainty. "I wish I could stay with you," she said one evening as they sat beneath the tree. The air was thick with the scent of cherry blossoms. "I would trade the silks and jewels for just one more moment in the sun with you. But I cannot do this. I am bound by duty, by my father's will." Yoon-gi reached out, grasping her hand tightly in his. "We can run. We can start a new life." She shook her head. "Not if I am the one who drags you into danger. You deserve more than this." "I only deserve you," Yoon-gi whispered, his voice full of emotion. The night before the king's arrival, the village was filled with anticipation. The streets were alive with excitement. The nobles stood in front of their homes, waiting to greet the royal procession, and the lower classes, like Yoon-gi's father, took to the streets to try and catch a glimpse of the king. But it was not the king that Yoon-gi was concerned about. It was Soo-ah. He watched the noble house, praying that she would somehow escape, that she would find a way out of the cage that was closing in around her. As night descended, Yoon-gi's father, exhausted from a long day's work, collapsed into bed. Yoon-gi knew that it was time. He slipped quietly out of the house and made his way toward the Ha estate. He had to find Soo-ah before the morning sun rose. They would leave together. He had nothing to offer but his love, but he would give everything. He reached the garden of the Ha estate, breathless. And there she was, Soo-ah, sitting beneath the tree waiting for him. "Soo-ah," Yoon-gi whispered, his voice hoarse. "It's time. We can leave now." She looked at him with soft, tear-filled eyes. "I can't," she said, barely above a whisper. "Why?" Yoon-gi's heart tightened. "My father has already arranged the match. He has already promised me to the king." She looked away, the pain evident in her face. "There is no turning back now. Not for me, not for you." Yoon-gi shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, we don't have to. We can fight it. We can." She placed a finger on his lips, stopping him. "We can't. Not against the king. Not against the power of royalty. Don't you see? I am no longer the girl who ran through the fields with you. I am now a pawn in a game I can't escape." Yoon-gi stood there, trembling, unable to find the words to express the depth of his loss. But then, Soo-ah did something that took him by surprise. She stepped closer and kissed him. A single, lingering kiss. A kiss filled with all the things they could never say. When she pulled away, she looked at him, her eyes clouded with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Yoon-gi. I never wanted this." Before he could say another word, she turned and disappeared into the shadows of the night. As the sun began to rise, heralding the arrival of the king, Yoon-gi stood alone before the Ha estate. He waited, knowing that the moment those gates opened, his entire world would vanish forever. His heart felt as though it had been shattered, broken piece by piece. The sound of the royal procession grew louder, and with a terrible certainty, he knew that Soo-ah would soon be gone. Suddenly, the gates swung open, and the carriage carrying Soo-ah emerged. Yoon-gi stared, desperate to catch one last glimpse of her. As if the wind had heard his silent prayer, a gentle breeze swept through, pulling the curtains aside, and there she was, elegant, stunning, and heartbreakingly beautiful. In that fleeting moment, their eyes met. She looked like the saddest person in the world, and it tore Yoon-gi apart. A single tear slipped down her cheek as the carriage moved away. Yoon-gi was devastated. The thought that she might never be happy again crushed him. Driven by despair, he began to run after the carriage, but it was too late. There was nothing he could do to stop this forced marriage. His Soo-ah was gone forever. Falling to his knees, Yoon-gi broke down, weeping uncontrollably, his sorrow echoing through the quiet morning.